Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's episode, we're going to look at a recently discovered medieval manuscript fragment that appears to contain an alternate version of the legendary wizard Merlin. The fragment dates to around 1540 and was found hidden inside the cover of a legal register from 1575. And what makes it so exciting is that the text contained within it seems to describe a forgotten version of Merlin with connections to demons and dragons. So let's get started. I am going to start by providing some context for the main sources we'll be looking at in this episode. The legal register in which the fragment was found and the fragment itself. The legal register in question is a property record known as a terrier. It was compiled for the manors of Water-Eaton and Little Milton in Oxfordshire, England in 1575. These two manors were owned by Sir Thomas Bridges, who commissioned the terrier to document the various properties he owned there, including houses, gardens, orchards. Each entry includes details like the name of the tenant and how much rent they paid, along with a brief description of the property itself. And while these records don't seem particularly exciting, they are a good example of a type of source known as an The process of making archival sources like this one was relatively quick and cheap, allowing people to copy and paste sections from other documents into them to save time and money. This practice allowed information to be reused, but also meant that certain documents could be copied multiple times, spreading their contents more widely than might otherwise have been possible. In the case of our legal register, it appears that the person who made the record some scraps of paper onto the end papers, the pages at the beginning and end of the book that are often used for loose scraps of paper or sketches, but because it was assumed that the information contained within the body of the terrier was more important, those end papers were glued down and covered with the text of the register. Because of this, the fragments found on them would not have been seen for over 400 years, until they were discovered by researchers from the University of Oxford in 2021. And that brings us to the second type of source we'll be looking at in this episode. The fragment itself. The fragment found on the front end paper of the legal register contains a single paragraph written in black ink on a slightly rough textured paper. There's no indication of where the text came from, though it does appear to be from a contemporary source given the high quality of the ink and the fact that it uses a type of watermark paper that was popular in the mid-16th century. Given that the fragment was folded in half when placed in the book, it looks like it may have originally been part of a longer document that has since been lost. We don't know exactly when the fragment was created, but based on the style of handwriting and the fact that it uses a type of paper that was popular in the mid-16th century, it likely dates to around 1540, about 35 years before the terrier was compiled. So now that we've looked at the two main types of sources we'll be looking at in this episode, it's time to dive into the fragment itself. The fragment contains the following text. Know thee that Merlin was a wizard born of a demon at a full feast in the presence of King Arthur. Pulled a white hart out of his hat and laid it at the king's feet and said, "My lord, here is a buck for thy dinner." The king accepted it and caused it to be written. Then Merlin took his wizard staff and caused the same hart to come again, whole out of the ashes, and delivered it to the queen, who was in childbed, saying, "Drink the decoction of this hart, and it shall do the good." As anyone familiar with Arthurian legend will immediately recognize, the story described in the fragment concerns the wizard Merlin and his miraculous recovery of Queen Guinevere after she gave birth to Mordred, Arthur's illegitimate son. But that's not all. The fragment also describes Merlin summoning a white hart out of his hat, an event that doesn't occur in any known version of the Merlin story. And while a hart is typically understood to be a male deer, the text refers to it as a buck, the word used for a male deer during the hunt. Later in the passage, Merlin delivers the recovered hart to the queen, instructing her to drink its broth. But rather than describing any kind of traditional medicine, Merlin instead concocts a potion using the mythical plant vervain, which is famous for its power to restore life. Now, none of this should be taken to mean that the original source containing this fragment didn't exist. After all, it would be unusual for someone to take the time to write out an entire story only to make up a set of characters and events. Instead, it simply means that the story described in the fragment has not survived in any other contemporary sources, and it's possible that it was considered too obscure or unimportant to copy in later centuries. But this is where things get really interesting. When we compare the actions attributed to Merlin in the fragment with the traditional list of his accomplishments, we find that they align almost perfectly with a series of miracles performed by a completely different legendary British figure. Merlin, the inspiration for Merlin Ambrosius. Aurelius, according to Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain, and a woman named Igraine, and was gifted with knowledge of magic by the Fairy Queen. As a child, He predicted the birth of Arthur and warned his father, King Ector, that he would lose his kingdom because of his wife's infidelity. Later, he used his magical abilities to protect Arthur from his enemies, including Mordred, whom he defeated in battle and banished from Britain. He then revealed the location of the magical sword Excalibur to Arthur, who used it to defeat his enemies and claim the throne of Britain. When compared to Merlinus Aurelius, we see that the actions attributed to Merlin in the fragment fit together to form a coherent narrative that aligns closely with the key events in the life of his possible inspiration. This is especially evident when we consider the fragment's opening line, which reads, "Know thee that Merlin was a wizard." The wording of this line strongly resembles the incipit or opening formula of a traditional medieval romance, a genre of narrative poetry that focused on the deeds of legendary heroes like King Arthur and his knights. And while romances typically focused on chivalric deeds like combat and courtly love, they could also include elements of folklore and magic. Given that Merlin was widely recognized as a wizard during the medieval period, it is likely that this fragment was originally part of a romance or cycle of romances that focused on his life and accomplishments. The mention of Merlin's miraculous recovery of the White Hart fits nicely into the traditional list of his accomplishments, though the details of the story clearly differ from the versions recorded by Geoffrey of Monmouth and other later writers. For example, the idea of Merlin delivering the heart to Guinevere, who was in childbed, fits nicely with the motif of Merlin acting as a healer, a common feature of his characterization in medieval literature. And while the text says nothing about Merlin using vervain, a herb known for its restorative powers, it is clear from the phrase "drink the decoction of this heart" that Merlin prepares some kind of magical potion. Unfortunately, the exact nature of this potion is unclear, though it is possible that it was meant to help Guinevere recover from childbirth, or to aid her in producing milk for the child. Medieval sources often portray Merlin as a kind of folk hero who uses his magic to help the poor and powerless, and there's a strong possibility that the fragment reflects this aspect of his character. Indeed, the medieval romance tradition frequently featured supernatural elements such as Merlin's magic. This combination of high and low elements is a hallmark of medieval culture, which often blended Christian, classical, and Germanic traditions in unique and unexpected ways. In conclusion, the fragment found in the legal register is an exciting discovery, reveals a previously unknown version of the legendary wizard Merlin. The story it tells aligns closely with the traditional list of Merlin's accomplishments, suggesting that it may have originally been part of a medieval romance cycle that focused on his life and deeds. While the exact nature of the fragment's Merlin is unclear, it is possible that it reflects a folk tradition that emphasized his miraculous powers and his ability to help the helpless. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider supporting the channel through donations or by purchasing merch. And as always, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.